Have you ever had that feeling that your life is stuck on repeat? Like you're doing all the right things, studying, working, following advice, being responsible, but deep down, something still feels off? That quiet emptiness you can't explain. How many times have you stayed quiet just to avoid conflict? Gone along with things you didn't agree with, smiled when you wanted to scream, just so you wouldn't rock the boat? How often have you dressed, spoken, or even acted in ways that didn't feel like you, just so others wouldn't judge you? Maybe you're tired of pretending everything is okay when you feel like you're drowning inside. Maybe you're starting to wonder, is this really all there is, or is there something more? A lot of people are living this exact script, trapped in a routine they never asked for, surrounded by strangers, doing things they never questioned. Why? Because following the crowd feels easier. It tells you what to do, how to live, and promises safety. You don't have to think too hard, take too many risks, or be too different. But here's the catch. That comfort costs you something big. You lose yourself. Nietzsche once said that most people would rather feel safe than feel free. That to hold on to comfort, they're willing to live small lives, predictable, dull, and hollow. That's what the crowd, or what we can call the herd, teaches. Settle for less. Fit in. Don't ask too many questions. Don't make people uncomfortable. Follow the script. Obey the rules, even if no one remembers where they came from. And the moment you start wanting more, to dream bigger, to challenge the norm, to live outside that tight little box, the herd starts pushing back. Not because you're wrong, but because you've become a threat. So the real question is it worth it? Is it worth spending your entire life molding yourself into something you're not, just to make everyone else comfortable? Because let me tell you, the security that the herd offers is just an illusion. The moment life throws a real challenge your way, that illusion cracks like glass. And by the time people realize it, it's often too late. They've survived, but they've never really lived. Maybe now's the time to ask yourself the question most people avoid. What do I actually want? And a deeper question. What am I willing to risk to truly be myself? Leaving the herd isn't easy. It costs a lot. But staying inside it, that costs everything. Think about how many dreams you've buried just to keep the peace. How many times you've shut up, toned down, or given up because you didn't want to disappoint someone. Maybe your parents, maybe your friends, maybe society as a whole. And maybe, just maybe, you're carrying fears that aren't even yours. Fears passed down from generation to generation, like invisible chains around your neck. The herd is an expert at making you feel guilty for wanting something different. It makes you feel wrong for trying to be yourself. Everyone around you, family, friends, co-workers, they all pile on expectations. And when you don't fit the mold, that fear kicks in. What if I disappoint them? What if I lose their love? What if they think I'm crazy? But that fear, it wears a disguise. It pretends to be common sense. It pretends to be responsibility or values. But really, it's just fear of freedom. Because being free means you have no script to follow, no applause, no guide. Nietzsche said, the morality of the herd is built on weakness. It turns fear into a virtue, obedience into pride. Being good becomes about following the rules, even when those rules are crushing your soul. So you start telling yourself the same old lines. I can't do that. My mom wouldn't approve. What if I fail? What will people think? Each of those thoughts, a prison. And you have to ask yourself, how long am I going to live like this? How long will I let fear decide who I get to be? Because sure, playing it safe feels easy, but the cost, you lose the chance to become you. And here's what happens the moment you take that first step out of the herd. Things start falling apart. Not in a bad way, but in a revealing way. The things you used to hold on to no longer make sense. Conversations start to feel fake. Relationships feel thin. You start to realize that many of your connections weren't real at all. They were built on routine, on fear, on mutual pretending. And when you finally start questioning the rules, really questioning them, you become the weird one, the rebel, the black sheep. And that hurts, not physically, but emotionally. It's this deep ache in your chest, like you're betraying something bigger than you. Your culture, your upbringing, your past. You start seeing the looks, the judgment, and you realize something brutal. A lot of people only liked you when you agreed with them. When you were part of the bubble, things were easy, but once you step outside it, the silence becomes deafening. That's the silence of exclusion, the silence of people who no longer know how to handle your freedom. Nietzsche understood this. The solitude of the freethinker, inevitable. That feeling of not belonging anymore, that quiet emptiness even when you're in a room full of people, that's the beginning of something real. You're waking up. That discomfort is the cost of stepping out of the system that's been molding you since you were a kid. The first break always hurts, but pain isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're finally alive. Freedom isn't a party. It's not confetti and cheers and everyone saying, "Wow, you're so brave." It's silence. It's a desert. And that desert is real. You feel it when you talk to people and realize they're not really there. They're repeating scripts, skimming life's surface, afraid of their own thoughts. You try to talk about deeper things, but you hit walls, so you speak less. Not because you have less to say, but because you realize most people aren't ready to hear it. Nietzsche saw this clearly. Solitude isn't punishment, it's a transformation. It strips you bare, makes you confront your fears, your truth, your desires. You stop chasing approval, and for the first time, you start chasing yourself. You realize that the need to be liked has been your biggest chain. And when everything feels heavy, when it feels like you're walking alone across this vast, empty plain, remember, this isn't the end. It's the path, the beginning. At first, the people around you will try to pull you back in. They'll say things like, "You're just confused," or "You're overthinking it." They'll tell you to go back to the way things were, to not complicate your life. But when they realize you're not turning around, the energy shifts. Concern turns into criticism. Advice turns into blame. Now, you're not just confused, you're arrogant, you're lost, you've changed too much. But deep down, that's not what they're afraid of. What they're really afraid of is that you're showing them what they never had the courage to become. You leaving the herd forces them to confront the fact that they stayed, and that stings. So they'll mask their fear as care. They'll say things like, "Be careful," or "Don't go too far," or "That's dangerous thinking." But what they're really saying is, "Don't remind me of my chains." Nietzsche called this the morality of resentment. And it's dangerous because it's quiet. It hides behind smiles, behind advice, behind concern. But it poisons you all the same. You'll hear things like, "You think you're better than us," or "You're going to regret this," or "You're being selfish." Sometimes the resentment comes from the people you love the most, and that's what cuts the deepest. Because you expected support, but instead, you got shame. That's why recognizing resentment matters. Not to get revenge, not to fight back, but to protect yourself. To see when advice is real, and when it's manipulation. To know when affection is love, and when it's just another leash. Because here's the truth. People who couldn't free themselves will often try to keep others captive. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. If you escape the prison, what does that say about them? And the most powerful response to that resentment: keep going. Don't explain, don't defend, don't seek approval. Just live, free, fully, quietly. Because when you choose to step outside the herd, the path ahead gets dark. The old rules stop working. And there's no new map waiting for you. You realize no one has the answers. There's no secret formula, no perfect role model, no guaranteed path. Just you and the choices you make. And that's terrifying. You suddenly have to build your own compass, forge your own code. Not borrowed values, not secondhand beliefs, but ones you've built from your own sweat, pain, trial, and fire. Nietzsche called this transvaluation. It's the process of taking apart the values you were handed and rebuilding them from your own experience. That's when you understand how fragile society's definitions really are. What's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. So much of it is just scaffolding to keep people in line. Once you step outside the lines, you realize none of those definitions actually fit. So instead of asking, "What's the right thing to do?" you ask, "What's right for me?" That's freedom, but it's also terrifying. Because now, you're not just living, you're experimenting. You're trying things, failing, adjusting, learning. You're making your own blueprint. And sure, you'll make mistakes. But now, they're your mistakes, not someone else's. That's the beauty of it. Every failure teaches you. Every scar becomes part of your story. Every wrong turn helps shape your right path. And eventually, something incredible happens. You stop caring what people think. You stop waiting for applause. You stop needing approval. Because now, your life is yours. There comes a moment where you stop explaining yourself altogether. You no longer try to convince people you're not crazy, or that your desire to live freely isn't just some impulsive phase. At first, you wanted to be understood. You tried to argue, to share, to explain. But over time, you realize most people only hear what they're ready to hear, and most aren't ready, so you stop talking. Not out of weakness, but out of strength. Silence becomes your protection, your power. You stop justifying your life to people who never had the courage to change theirs. You no longer feel the need to be understood, because you finally understand yourself. And that's the shift. Nietzsche once said that maturity begins when you stop trying to convince others, when you no longer owe anyone an explanation, when you finally realize your truth doesn't need to be accepted to be real. The herd still talks, still gossips, still speculates. But now, it doesn't touch you. You don't flinch, because you're no longer in that race. There's a kind of silence that comes from fear, a silence that hides, avoids, and submits. But then there's another kind, the silence of someone who has nothing left to prove. It's calm, it's still, it's confident. It's the silence of someone who knows. You become more selective. You stop entertaining drama. You protect your peace like a sacred flame. You realize that not everyone deserves access to your energy, your presence, or your mind, because peace, real, deep peace, is more valuable than all the approval in the world. You stop speaking just to be heard, and start listening to your own clarity. And in the end, that silence says more than any speech ever could, because sometimes the people who speak the prettiest words carry the ugliest poison. The herd loves to dress up resentment in noble language. They talk about love while secretly rooting for your failure. They preach kindness, but quietly cheer when you fall. They say they care, but only if you return to their path. That's not love. That's fear. That's control. That's envy, camouflaged in virtue. Nietzsche saw this clearly. Resentment is the most dangerous energy in the herd. It's not honest anger, it's subtle sabotage. A quiet whisper that says, "If I couldn't be free, neither should you." Because to see you break the chains reminds them that theirs are still wrapped around their necks, so they lash out. Not because you're wrong, but because you're reminding them of what they gave up. You've probably felt this. Maybe when you moved to a new city, started a new project, left a relationship. Maybe when you just wanted to change, to grow, to start again. And suddenly, the looks came. The sarcasm, the judgment, the guilt trips. Wow. You think you're better now? You've changed. You're going to regret this. Sometimes those words come from the people closest to you, the people you thought would support you, and that hurts. But now you know. That pain is your teacher. That clarity is your freedom. You don't respond with anger. You don't argue. You don't stoop to their level. You just keep going. And then something happens. Something nobody warned you about. When you leave the herd, all the usual signs disappear. The rewards, the praise, the roadmap, gone. Suddenly, it's just you and the unknown. No lights, no markers, no guarantees. And that's the hardest part. You're forced to create your own meaning, forge your own ethics, define your own values, not inherited from your parents, not copied from the crowd, but built from your own soul. And it's terrifying. Because now, every step you take is yours. Every consequence lands on you. Every choice has no one else to blame. Freedom doesn't come with training wheels. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with responsibility. Heavy, uncomfortable, beautiful responsibility. And yes, that weight can crush you, but it can also build you. Because when you own your life, every mistake, every scar, every victory, you stop being a character in someone else's story. You become the author of your own. Nietzsche said that few can bear the burden of real freedom. Most would rather trade it for comfort, for routine, for certainty. But if you can carry it, if you can walk through the desert without breaking, what waits on the other side is unlike anything else. Real life, real power, real peace. Freedom doesn't promise safety. It doesn't offer applause, but it offers something more: authenticity. The chance to live without masks, without pretending, without needing anyone's approval. You become your own guide. and that's priceless. You stop waiting for someone to lead you. You stop hoping someone has the answers, because now you see no one does. Not the gurus, not your parents, not the experts. Everyone's just as lost. They just hide it better. And that's when it hits you. If no one has the map, then I'll draw my own. That's what Nietzsche called the Übermensch. Not a perfect person, not a superior being, but a human being who creates their own values, their own meaning, their own truth. A person who lives without needing to belong to the herd. You're not better than others. You're just done being someone you're not. You don't need validation. You don't need permission. You don't need to explain. You walk with quiet certainty. You move with calm fire. You lead without trying to lead, because the most powerful message isn't spoken. It's lived. In the end, legacy isn't about fame or praise or having the most followers. It's about having the courage to be yourself, fully, boldly, unapologetically, even if it costs you everything. So when the world tries to pull you back, remember what you've walked through: the desert, the silence, the judgment, the loneliness, the resentment. You faced it. You didn't fold. You didn't crawl back. You kept going. Now you are your own guide, and no one can take that from you. And that freedom is yours forever.